Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through the 3 things we accomplished, as well as a 4th task that we started, and I hoped we were going to finish, but we did not. It took so much longer than I thought it would, and just so you know, everything takes longer than you think it will. And another secret is it almost always costs more than you think it should. All right, so let's jump into it. My name is Michelle. Blaze is behind me in bed. She's got a full belly, so she's taking a nap. One of the most important things I did, and the first thing I did outside of cleaning the interior of the van, was to think about layouts or floor plans. It was very important to me that the space feel as big and open and spacious as it possibly could be. I did not want to feel cramped or claustrophobic, which in a teeny tiny space is very possible. So I downloaded these side view, top views from Far Out Ride. I paid $85 for their builder's package, and you get these as well as some guides about propane installation, electrical installation, plumbing installation, and discounts on some commonly used vendors. And for the most part, I just use these. So you'll see that I went through a couple different floor plans, and I am using Canva to place all the different rectangles and color code them and move them around just so that I could get a sense of where things might need to go, right? From a weight distribution standpoint to wanting to keep that spaciousness that I mentioned, as well as a way to keep things easily accessible so that you're not having to remove 2 or 3 things to get to the next thing. And I'll be honest, it changes as you go throughout the build, unless you're like an engineer or an architect and you can think through all of the complex systems that are fully interconnected with each other, and you can just source everything and know exactly how it's all going to go together. If you can't do that, because I certainly couldn't do that, then it's going to change. Your layout's going to change. The components you use are going to change. They're going to change location. You might switch what you're sourcing to something completely different. As I mentioned in my previous video about the van build, I used Pinterest to gather inspirational photos, information, ideas about different ways to do things, and this is my inspo. This looks cozy to me, a little cottagey. I wanted to make my van a little more modern and maybe not bring the warmth of the ceiling planks down the sides of the van, but this gives you a sense of the layout, the color scheme, and the warmth and comfort, coziness that I was going for. Working on the headliner this morning. Watched a couple videos and learned that you can just pull the center section down, and I cut some mini cell to fit, and now I'm gonna close it up and she'll be insulated and sound deadened. So I just got the panels off of here. I'm gonna insulate and then put them back on eventually. Still waiting on insulation to arrive. Should be here Wednesday. Just finished adding the mini cell to where the wet bath will be, and then this is where the feet go. So thin layer of insulation and sound deadening. I need more riv nuts and more screws for the riv nuts. but all of the lower framing pieces have been cut. The insulation is here. I can finally finish insulating the rear doors and put the black moldings back on. I now have M6 and M8 bolts, so I can start to frame out the van. The van is almost completely insulated, minus where the air conditioner is going to go. Need to take out the foam blobby bit to finish up there, and then where the window needs to go. Making progress, slowly but surely. The vertical buttons are done. Sweet! So many tools. Look at Blaze doing her best impression of a model. Made a lot of progress over the last month. I've got insulation doubled up in almost all the places. We beefed up the framing. We figured out the bed a bit better. And I've got an outlet for shore power now that we put in today. And I'm starting to run wire. Next will be like putting walls up and building furniture and putting in water tanks and filters and all kinds of crazy stuff. It's all a learning process. As I mentioned before, I found the electrical side of the van build to be extremely overwhelming and complicated. Yes, I know how a circuit works, but still, I think it's just so complicated for me. I think if I only had 12-volt DC components, or if I only had AC components and I wasn't having to kind of mesh the two together, maybe it would have been a little easier. So do yourself a favor. Make sure you do a lot of research, watch a lot of YouTube videos, grab a friend, grab your dad. Thankfully, mine had done a lot of electrical work before. My grandpa was an electrician, and so my dad pretty much did all of the electrician stuff, all the electrical stuff. I ran the wires, and then he came behind me and he helped me simplify things later on down the road. The second thing I learned, and not necessarily in this phase of the build, but later, and so I'm sharing it with you now so you don't make the same mistake, is be very aware of where you place your vertical and horizontal studs. Um, I found out later on that, doing a traditional 12 or 16 inches on center in a van build doesn't really make sense. So we had to modify things later on to accommodate where a stud would be and then where a wall panel would rest to make sure that there was a stud there for it to actually rest on. So do yourself some due diligence and have a good sense of where that's all going to be. Add more studs than you think you need to. Just know that it adds weight and cost and time, but maybe it'll help you in the long run. All right, so month 2 cost. How much did it all cost? Insulation, I bought 3M Thinsulate, and eventually I used rock wool to kind of fill the super deep gaps in between the metal paneling of the van and where the vertical or horizontal ribs of the van, there's this huge gap. I used the rock wool to fill that, and then I put the Thinsulate over top of it. But insulation was $712. The pre-wiring, I bought marine grade wire, conduit, zip ties, all kinds of stuff. And at the end of the day, between all the things that we had to wire, I spent about $700. And then in this phase of the build, I spent about $250 on wood for framing as well as riv nuts and bolts. I bought much more later on. So that number will go up. And then I spent $30 on the shore power connection point that we installed. That was like one of the last things we installed before I started doing the pre-wiring. In total, month 2 expenses came to $1,692. Between month 1 and month 2, I spent about $3,000. To be a little more accurate, I spent $2,951, which is close to what my monthly goal was and what my budget was. I wanted to spend between $1,200 and $1,500 per month over the course of the build, which would land me around $15,000. But did I end up there? We shall see. Thank you so much for being here, for sticking around. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And I will continue to share with you guys our build process, the challenges we faced, what we learned along the way, how much it cost, and anything that I would do differently if I ever build another van. So thanks for being here, and take good care of yourselves, okay?